What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a video about The Witcher 2, the Enhanced Edition, roughly 10 years after having played it the last time. As I decided I finally wanted to get around to covering it on the channel because story-wise, The Witcher 2 is actually my favorite one. And having finally covered the original title earlier this year as well, I was pretty excited to get to this one, of course. However, at the start of this video, I'd like to mention that The Witcher 2 has, in the last few years, sadly not aged super well in terms of hardware. In a surprise to me, actually, the game will not run right away, and for a game that released only back in 2011, that is somewhat surprising. However, The Witcher 2 does have a few specific issues that keep it from running on anything more recent than the past few years. However, that is not insurmountable, but you do need to be comfortable messing with a few different files and setting the CPU cores in use for the title. So the launcher for The Witcher 2 is the main problem with getting the game to actually run, because the launcher will get confused if you have a larger CPU with too many cores. It simply doesn't know which one to use. So you have to go into Task Manager and force the launcher to only use a single core, which will enable it to actually launch the game. However, while that is simple enough to fix, the problems continue after that, because there's a similar issue with graphics cards being a little too much for this game to handle, and the game often doesn't know what to do with it. So this will lead you to having to tinker with various settings quite a bit, none of which can be done in-game. Perhaps most frustratingly about The Witcher 2 is that most of the options have to be done in the launcher, so you can't just bring up the menu in-game and change graphical settings, which is what makes this process so frustrating on top of the launcher issue with the CPU. CD Projekt Red's engine at this time would set a limit on the amount of memory that the textures were allowed to use, which at the time was pretty relevant, but these days not so much. So oftentimes that limit is woefully small or it will change, which causes a lot of problems if you're trying to play this on a modern resolution, such as 4K. And that limit, combined with your GPU's normal attempts to start rendering frames ahead of time, makes it very difficult to get a solid frame rate. So what I wound up having to do was, of course, turn the game down to 1080 because 4K is like 20 FPS due to the way this game is set up. On top of that, I had to go into NVIDIA's control panel and set the low latency settings to max, basically to essentially force my GPU to not render the game so quickly. And in doing both of those things, I was able to get a decent frame rate for the game, but even then it's not amazing. So as you can see, there are a lot of problems with this game in modern hardware. But if you are willing to push past those things, we can actually talk about the rest of the game and what it has to offer. So as I mentioned, I've played this game before. Not only that, I've played this game a lot. The Witcher 2 has 16 different endings. You can also import your save from The Witcher 1, which will affect a few things. Depending on your choices throughout the game, the entire middle chapter can be entirely different. So needless to say, there's a lot of choice and consequence, which is why story-wise 2 is actually my favorite. Now gameplay-wise, it leaves a lot to be desired, because the switch from The Witcher 1's stat-based combat to the more action-focused combat in 2 came with a few speed bumps. And while 3 mostly ironed a lot of this stuff out, 2 feels very janky as a result. The big thing you'll hear people mention is the hitboxes, which is mostly in relation to dodging out of the way. They're a little bit wonky. Sometimes, even if you dodge, you'll still get hit, which, if I'm remembering correctly, is down to the game taking into account where you are when the attack starts and not where you are when the move actually happens. Now, once you kind of get used to that, it's relatively easy to get into the combat, because beyond that, it's pretty standard action stuff. You have the ability to parry, which will reduce damage, of course, or you can even use signs or any of the new ranged options that were added. You can even set traps to lead enemies into and kill them that way, so you have a variety of options that simply weren't present in the first game, but make no mistake, it definitely feels very janky. But then we have a variety of other things, such as the action sequences the game tries to set up, which are usually done through quick time events, which definitely aren't everybody's cup of tea. And even more than that, it's possible for Geralt to die in a variety of conversations throughout the game. There are several where the ongoing situation is very dangerous, and if you pick these sort of antagonistic options, in a few conversations you'll just die outright, which is also something I remember pretty fondly, though outside of those things, the rest of The Witcher 2 plays somewhat similarly to the first game in that it's a relatively linear game where you play through hubs. So in Act 1 you'll be in Flotsam, in Act 2 you're on one side or another of a battle, and then things kind of wrap up in Chapter 3. However, in each of those chapters you're free to explore the given area. And of course, solve side quests, hunt down monsters, and make a variety of moral decisions which lead you to one of the 16 endings of the game. And the story of this game is done so well that you'll often see it very highly praised, in spite of all the problems I've listed up to this point. So, story-wise, this happens about a month after the end of The Witcher 1, and as many people are, I'm sure aware at this point, Letho starts going around murdering various kings, and his murder of King Foltest, which serves as the prologue of this game, which we are in the dungeon for, ultimately sees us framed for it, which is why we're in the dungeon about it. And we naturally need to escape that and try to clear our name while also figuring out why Letho is doing this. However, regicide inherently leads to a lot of political power vacuums that cause all sorts of other problems that then lead to the events of The Witcher 3. So to wrap this video up, clearly I know a lot about The Witcher 2. So why am I doing all of this now, finally? And the answer to that is that there are 3 achievements for this game that I am missing. 2 are just miscellaneous stuff I could probably get very quickly. And then the last achievement I'm missing is for beating the game on Insane mode. The Witcher 2 has a variety of difficulties. One of them, called Dark, is very difficult and even adds new items to the game, which, if I remember correctly, is 3 different outfits that give you various set bonuses to help you with that mode. However, Insane difficulty is, I believe, puts the game on hard mode, but also in Iron Man mode. So if you die, it's game over. And given all the ways your character can die that have nothing to do with combat in this game, on top of the actual combat and the hitbox problems, it's something I just never got around to trying. So, while I move to review this title finally and just get it out there on the channel, I really want to wrap up these last few achievements and sort of put a cap on this. I believe the last one I achieved was all the way back in 2014, and after playing through it a little bit, I think I'll be okay on this one. So timing-wise, this one's hard to say. That might take me a while, it might not take very long at all, because the game itself is very, very short. One playthrough of The Witcher 2 will run you like maybe 25 hours. However, it's very replayable thanks to all the endings you can get and the various parts in Act 2. But I've already seen all that stuff, so what I need to do is gather footage for the review, of course, as well as finish off that Insane mode playthrough, which might take me a while, might not take very long at all. Although I will say I'm playing through the game probably until about Chapter 2 or so, just to kind of get all my muscle memory going, that kind of thing, before I jump fully into the Insane playthrough, which is nice for reminding me of the variety of mechanics at play, such as the way you drink potions in this game, or how you level up and how you specialize, because that works a bit differently here. You can meditate pretty much anywhere in this title, but you can only drink potions while you're meditating, so drinking them right before combat is a no-go. And that makes things like healing very central to how the game works, because on higher difficulties you can be murdered in just a couple of hits, especially if you get hit in the back, which is like double damage. So I kind of gotta get my memory going for all those things, and remember what points in the skill trees to pick up, because this game sees you filling out the first sort of core Witcher training first, and then after that's done, you can then specialize into one of the other trees, which is, again, alchemy, magic, or swordsmanship, as usual with these games. So the progression systems aren't complicated, and I think once I jog my memory a bit, I should hit the ground running, and I'm excited to do so because The Witcher 2 is a really fun game that I haven't played in a long time, and I'm really looking forward to doing this review. So hopefully you're looking forward to seeing it, and if you are, like, comment, subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this video, but regardless of all that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.